All right, and now we're going to go to Ryan in Massachusetts. Hey, Ryan, you're calling because you want to know why truth is important?
No, not quite. So let me just also, I want to say this is super exciting. Thanks for having me on. You guys are doing great.
Thanks,
Sure.
Ryan.
I'm a big fan. But I wanted to start off with a little anecdote that prompted this question.
Okay.
So I debate people all the time on the internet, and while I'm doing that, it's often about religion, and usually, well, not quite usually, but sometimes a third party will just randomly join in and say, "Why do you have to debate this?" What else is it? Why do you have to debate this? Why can't you just let them believe what they believe as long as they're not hurting anybody? And my answer to that would be, truth is important and everybody should believe it, but I can't quite give a reason why. It just feels intuitive. So I wanted to ask.
Well, there's a reason it feels intuitive, and there's a reason that people want to know what is actually going on around them and not to be unaware of the things that are going. Not only is truth important, but the amount of truth that you have is important, right? So if you go to buy my house, would you prefer that we have it inspected before you make me an offer or not? I mean, before you buy it. I guess you make the offer before you get the inspection. But let's say you're going to buy my house. Are you willing to let that sale go through without an inspection?
No, not at all.
Why not?
So yeah, the reason I called in is because I basically want something I can say to convince people who say
you can basically give them any example where it would matter if you know something. If you're crossing a street, would you want to have accurate information about whether a car is coming, or would you rather just close your eyes and run across the intersection? Does it matter to you if a car is actually coming or not? And the fact is, of course it does, right? And of course you want that information. When you buy a house without an inspection, you're taking a gigantic risk. You could be dumping tons of money into that thing. So in addition to putting your life at risk by saying, well, I don't care if there's really cars coming when I cross the street, it's fine with me if I just delusionally believe the street is clear and step out into heavy traffic. That's ridiculous. And it's ridiculous for, when somebody says, why do you care about the truth, or why does it matter? It matters because a lot of times it's life and death. Do you want to know the truth if you get a scan for cancer? Would you rather that scan come back and honestly tell you that you have it so that you can enter treatment? Or would you rather that it comes back and tells you that you don't have it and then you don't get treatment and you do have it and the scan is wrong? The truth matters all the time. Well, when I say all the time, what I'm saying is that broadly and generally, it most often matters. There are times when something doesn't matter, but
and I would acknowledge that to some people, maybe they don't care that what they believe is true. I would say for me, I do care for those reasons, that I want to believe things that are true and not believe things that are false. If this other person, that's not important to them, then knock yourself out.
Yeah, but the other problem is that, let's say that I don't care about myself. Do I care about my children?
Yeah.
Do I want the truth about the school I'm going to send them to? Do I want the truth about the pediatrician that I'm using? If that person is like a child molester, do I want to know this? For other people, even if I don't care about myself, do I care about anyone else enough to, want to be able to be making decisions based on accurate information and be as fully informed as possible and as accurately informed as possible? We rely on good information in so many ways in everything that we do all the time. And if we didn't have that, I don't think we would survive very long as individuals or as a species.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a second and say, but in those circumstances, it really does make an impact. But for religion, it doesn't matter. It's not going to affect your daily life. I'm sure somebody would say that to me in that context.
They say what they do is they whittle this down to like this weird concept that all religion is sort of liberal and innocuous, and that all religion is supportive of justice, and and it's not, right? I mean, there are some religions that are hideous, and there are some and it goes from completely horrible to mostly benign. right? And yeah, if you're on the mostly benign part of it, which is almost like when people talk about hitting their kids, right? You get into a conversation on a thread about people hitting their children, and by the time you're done, people are like, oh, I just meant that I like tap them on the shoulder to get their attention. That's what I'm calling a spanking. And it's like, no, you're not. Like, let's be honest, right? When you're saying that you're hitting them, you're hitting them and you're trying to inflict, some sort of pain. It's a negative reactor. But when you get into those arguments, they lessen it and lessen it and lessen it to try to make it like the least of like possible thing. And this is what they do with the religious thing, right? Nobody wants to say, what about the guy who flew a plane into a building, right? They all want to talk about, well, but this church, does a food pantry and they aren't anti-gay and they are, and sure, if somebody's in a church that's like socially benign, and, about the only thing you can say is that if I'm willing to believe things that aren't true, then I can be influenced by things that aren't true. It just so happens that this person is influenced at this point by something that may be socially helpful or may be socially benign. The fact is, if they don't think well, if they don't reason well, if they can't differentiate truth from fiction, and if they don't care about truth from fiction, it's much easier for someone to come in and sell them on a harsher truth. Or a harsher claim of, a truth claim, even if it's not true. So a person who already believes in God, it's a much easier sell to try to convince them that their God wants them to do this thing that may move them a little closer to the horrible, right? Than somebody who already doesn't believe in the God. And that's not to say that there aren't secular reasons people do horrible things too. Please don't misunderstand. It's just that this conversation is regarding your conversations with religious people and why it doesn't matter. And I do think that if the particular thing that they're following is benign or socially helpful, they can, in that moment, kind of argue that if they're wrong, it's not doing harm. But I think that it's still sketchy, right? It's like saying, well, I run across the street all the time blindfolded and I've never been hit. So I've always been successful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And what happens when, and I've heard these calls before. I've heard people say, my mother was religious and she was always very good and the religion that she was involved in was very good. But as she got older, she started to get in with this crowd with more conservative religion, and now she's starting to hate gay people, and she's starting to, and so there is that risk that even a person who is part of a really loving, sort of religion that's preaching equality and preaches tolerance, that person can, for different reasons, fall into religions that are much less tolerant. It happens.
Yeah, it's the mindset of kowtowing to authority, unquestioned authority, and it makes you open.
Yeah.
To those kinds of things, even if you're not currently doing anything harmful.
It works the other way too. I've heard calls, or have people reach out to us who say that they had a situation where maybe a relative was involved with a religion that was very dangerous, like faith healing cults, and they were able to reach out to people who were engaged in religion that is not doing that, does not believe in faith healing, that does use doctors, and they were able to then find a way to sort of convince their religious relative to go and see a doctor and go and get help, because they found someone that kind of speaks that religious language that could convince them God thinks it's okay to go to a doctor. So it kind of works, it's a fluid thing. It doesn't always go in one direction, but yes, if their point is only that, it's possible to believe something false and that it's not causing harm, that's correct. But it's really not possible to have an attitude, such a lax attitude about the truth, and to have this concept that it doesn't matter if my beliefs are true as a general way of handling life, and not put yourself at risk of being conned or somehow dragged into something that could do harm to you or other people.
That is exactly the kind of answer I was looking for. I don't think I have anything else to add, so thanks a ton for having me on, and keep fighting the good fight, I guess.
All right. Thank you for your call, Jacob.
That was Ryan.
Bye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ryan.
Ooh, well, I guess I gave away where we're going next. So
I just wanted to mention real quick that there's actually a website.
I did a bad thing.
Oh, you dropped somebody who you shouldn't have?
Because I thought we were on Jacob.
Oh,
this is
darn
my
it.
bad. I dropped Jacob.
Oh, Jacob, call back.
if you're, please call back. And that means then I'm going to drop that one. We'll go ahead and put Ryan, and I need to be more meticulous with my notes.
Let me just mention there's actually a website, because this "What's the Harm" comes up a lot, and I think it's what'stheharm.com that kind of goes through what you were saying and says, there is a harm. It's not just innocuous to believe something and not care about whether it's true or not.
Well, there's the example, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was true that I had Jacob on the line because he was the next one up, and I had Ryan, and I dropped Jacob. And this is what happens when you believe things that aren't true.